The encounter, the research vessel. Harmony's Edge drifted silently through the Kepler 442 system, its hull scarred from countless expeditions into uncharted territories. Dr. Zara Nightwind pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced transparisteel, watching the emerald world below rotate slowly in the void. 3 months aboard this ship, cataloguing xenofauna for the Terran Research Collective, and she still felt the familiar mix of excitement and dread that came with first contact protocols. "Another paradise world," muttered Chief Navigator Tobias, Flint from behind her, his weathered face reflected in the window. "Wonder what's trying to kill us down there this time." Zara couldn't blame his cynicism. Every supposedly habitable world they'd surveyed had presented its own unique dangers. Kepler 442b appeared different, though. Lush forests stretching across vast continents, crystalline rivers cutting through valleys that sparkled with bioluminescent flora. The preliminary scans suggested an ecosystem more diverse than Earth's, with apex predators that displayed unprecedented intelligence levels. The shuttle bay's alert chime echoed through the corridors as Captain Morrison Blackthorn's voice crackled over the intercom. "Landing party to Shuttle Bay 3. We make planetfall in 20 minutes. Zara gathered her equipment with practiced efficiency. Bioscanners, sample containers, emergency beacon, and the standard-issue plasma rifle she hoped never to use. The weight of the weapon always made her uncomfortable. She'd entered xenobiology to study and preserve life, not destroy it. The landing party consisted of 6 members: herself, Tobias, Security Chief Dante Wolfram, Communications Specialist Luna, Stormwright, Medic Jonas Emberstone, and their android observer Unit 7 designated as Sage. Their mission was straightforward: establish a research camp, document the local ecosystem, and identify any potential threats to future colonization efforts. The shuttle descended through layers of pearl-white clouds, revealing a canopy so dense it seemed almost solid from above. Ancient trees stretched toward the sky like cathedral spires, their bark shimmering with an opalescent quality that suggested mineral deposits or perhaps symbiotic organisms. As they touched down in a natural clearing beside a meandering stream, Zara felt the familiar rush of standing on an alien world for the first time. "Air's breathable," announced Luna, checking her atmospheric readings. "Oxygen levels slightly higher than Earth normal. Temperature holding steady at 22 degrees Celsius. They established their perimeter quickly, setting up the quantum communications array and deploying sensor drones in a 3-kilometer radius. The forest seemed to pulse with life, chittering calls echoing from the canopy, rustling movements in the undergrowth, and an underlying harmonic resonance that seemed to emanate from the trees themselves. As twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Zara ventured to the stream's edge to collect water samples. The liquid glowed faintly with phosphorescent microorganisms, creating patterns like liquid starlight. She was so absorbed in her work that she almost missed the eyes watching her from across the water, golden orbs that reflected the dying light with predatory intelligence. The mistake. The creature emerged from the undergrowth with fluid grace that spoke of perfect evolutionary design. Standing nearly 2 meters at the shoulder, it resembled a fusion of feline and something entirely alien. Sleek obsidian fur, rippled with bioluminescent stripes that pulsed in complex patterns, possibly a form of communication. Its 6 legs moved in perfect synchronization, each ending in retractable claws that could shred titanium. Most striking were its eyes, intelligent, calculating, and completely focused on Zara. She froze, bioscanner still clutched in trembling hands. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she knew sudden movement might trigger an attack. The creature tilted its elongated head, studying her with what seemed like curiosity rather than hunger. The bioluminescent patterns along its flanks, shifted from deep blue to amber, creating a hypnotic display. "Easy," she whispered, more to herself than the creature. "I'm not here to hurt you." The being stepped delicately into the stream, water cascading from its pores without disturbing the phosphorescent organisms. It approached slowly, deliberately, each movement economical and purposeful. Zara realized this was likely the apex predator. Their scans had detected, and it was far more magnificent than any simulation had suggested. The camp's proximity alarm suddenly shrieked through the forest, startling both human and alien. The creature's patterns flashed brilliant red as it reared back, and Zara's trained reflexes took over. Without thinking, she drew her plasma rifle and fired a warning shot into the air, hoping to scare it away from the camp. The plasma bolt struck a low-hanging branch, sending burning debris cascading down. A piece of superheated metal struck the creature across its left flank, burning through fur and flesh with a sickening hiss. The being let out a sound that was part roar, part something like a whale's song, deep, mournful, and intelligent enough to make Zara's heart break. Golden eyes fixed on her with what she could only interpret as betrayal and pain. The creature's patterns shifted to deep crimson, streaked with black as it limped backward, ichor seeping from the wound she'd inadvertently caused. For a moment, they stared at each other across the stream, predator and researcher, both wounded, in different ways. Then it was gone, vanishing into the forest with barely a rustle of leaves. Dante and the others reached her position within minutes, weapons drawn and scanning for threats. "What happened?" the security chief demanded, noting her pale complexion and the scorch marks on nearby vegetation. There was a creature. The alarm startled it, and Zara stared at the drops of luminescent blood glowing against the dark stones. "I hurt it. It wasn't attacking, just curious, and I hurt it." Sage approached the blood samples with scientific detachment. "Xenobiological matter detected. Shall I collect specimens for analysis?" "No," Zara said sharply, then softer. "No, we've done enough damage." She holstered her weapon with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The creature's eyes haunted her, intelligent, aware, and now knowing that humans were capable of causing pain without provocation. The guilt. 3 weeks passed without another sighting of the wounded predator. Zara threw herself into her research with desperate intensity, cataloguing hundreds of species while her teammates explored deeper into the forest. Each night, she returned to the stream where the encounter had occurred, hoping for some sign that the creature survived her panicked mistake. The ecosystem revealed itself to be even more complex than initial scans suggested. Symbiotic relationships existed between species that shouldn't coexist, and the bioluminescent communication patterns extended throughout the food chain. Most intriguingly, several species displayed problem-solving abilities that approached or exceeded those of Earth's dolphins and great apes. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Jonas observed one evening as Zara prepared for another solo reconnaissance mission. The medic's concerned gaze took in her hollow cheeks and the dark circles under her eyes. "When did you last sleep more than 3 hours?" "I'm fine," she lied, checking her equipment for the dozenth time. The truth was that sleep brought dreams of golden eyes filled with pain and accusation. She joined the Xenobiology Corps to make contact with alien intelligence, to bridge the gap between species through understanding and respect. Instead, her first encounter had been marked by violence and fear. Captain Blackthorne had accepted her incident report without comment, filing it under acceptable defensive measures. The fact that her actions were justified by protocol made it worse somehow. The creature had been curious, not aggressive, and she'd responded with fire and pain. Her private research revealed disturbing patterns in the local ecosystem's behavior. Bioluminescent communications between species had decreased by 30% since the incident. Predator sightings in the region had dropped to nearly zero. It was as if word of human treachery had spread through some network they couldn't detect or understand. "The forest is watching us," Luna reported during their nightly briefings. "Communications intercepts suggest coordinated observation patterns. Multiple species maintaining visual contact with our perimeter at all times." Dante interpreted this as a potential threat, recommending increased security measures and restricted movement beyond the camp's defensive perimeter. But Zara suspected something different. They were being evaluated, judged for their worthiness to share this world. On the 20th night, she violated direct orders and ventured deep into the forest alone. Her bioscanner detected elevated life signs throughout the canopy, but nothing approached her position. The sensation of being watched was overwhelming, pressing against her consciousness like a weight. She reached a moonlit clearing dominated by a massive tree whose trunk could have housed a small city. Bioluminescent moss covered its bark in spiraling patterns that seemed to pulse with the planet's heartbeat. At its base lay offerings, not quite tribute, but arrangements of stones, crystalline formations, and what appeared to be primitive art. This was a sacred place, she realized, a location of significance to the native intelligence, and scattered around the tree's base were droplets of luminescent blood, now crystallized into amber-like formations that glowed with inner light. The creature had been here. It had survived. Her attack had made its way to this place of power or healing, but the blood trail suggested its wound was far worse than she'd initially believed. Guilt crashed over her in waves as she knelt among the crystallized remains of its pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the watching darkness. "I'm so sorry." Something moved in the shadows above, and for a moment she thought she glimpsed golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. But when she looked directly, nothing was there except the patient, ancient tree and her own crushing remorse. The return against all regulations and the direct orders of Captain Blackthorn, Zara returned to the sacred grove every night for a week. She brought no weapons, no recording equipment, nothing that could be construed as threatening. Instead, she carried offerings of her own, water purification tablets that might help heal the ecosystem's wounds, samples of earth foods that might appeal to alien biology, and most importantly, her complete vulnerability. On the 7th night, she wasn't alone. The creature emerged from the shadows with deliberate slowness, favoring its injured side, but moving with the same liquid grace she remembered. The plasma burn had healed into a distinctive scar that cut through the bioluminescent patterns along its flank, a permanent reminder of their first encounter. Zara remained perfectly still as it approached, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to run or defend herself. The being stopped just beyond arm's reach, golden eyes studying her with an intensity that seemed to peer into her soul. Its communication patterns flickered through colors she'd never seen before, deep purples, shot through with silver, creating mandalas of light across its obsidian fur. "I know you remember me," she said softly, keeping her voice low and non-threatening. "I'm the one who hurt you. I came back because I needed you to know it was a mistake. I was afraid, and I acted without thinking. You didn't deserve that." The creature's head tilted, and she could have sworn she saw recognition in those alien features. It took another step closer, near enough that she could see the subtle intelligence in its gaze, the way it analyzed her posture and tone, with the dedication of a scientist studying a new specimen. Over the following nights, their encounters became a ritual. Zara would arrive at sunset and wait in the clearing's center while the creature observed from the forest's edge. Gradually, it began approaching closer, sometimes circling her position with predatory grace, but never displaying aggression. Its bioluminescent patterns grew more complex during these encounters, cycling through combinations that suggested sophisticated communication attempts. She began to recognize patterns in its display. Certain color combinations appeared when she spoke in calm tones, others when she moved too quickly or made sudden gestures. The creature was learning her behavioral patterns just as she was studying its communication methods. "You're trying to talk to me, aren't you?" she whispered. One night, as it completed another slow circuit around her position, "I wish I understood. I wish I could explain what happened, why I reacted that way." The being stopped directly in front of her, head lowered to bring its eyes level with hers. The wound she'd caused was clearly visible, a jagged line of scar, tissue that disrupted the natural flow of its bioluminescent patches. But there was no hatred in its gaze, only a complex mixture of wariness and what might have been curiosity. Luna had been tracking her unauthorized excursions through the team's equipment logs. "You're going to get yourself killed," the communications specialist warned her during a private conversation. "Or worse, you're going to compromise the entire mission. What if that thing is just waiting for the right moment to strike?" But Zara knew better. The creature had multiple opportunities to attack when she was completely vulnerable, and it had chosen restraint every time. If it wanted revenge, she would already be dead. Instead, it seemed to be conducting its own evaluation, trying to understand the contradictory being who had first wounded it and then returned night after night without weapons or protection. On the 10th night, something changed. The creature approached her position and then, instead of circling, settled onto its haunches just 3 meters away. Its patterns shifted to soft blues and greens, colors she'd begun to associate with calm observation rather than threat assessment. They sat together in comfortable silence as the moons rose overhead, predator and researcher sharing the sacred space in tentative peace. The forgiveness, the breakthrough came on a night when Kepler 442b's 3 moons aligned in perfect conjunction, bathing the forest in silver light that made every bioluminescent organism glow like captured stars. Zara arrived at the grove to find the creature already waiting, but its posture was different, less guarded, more relaxed. The patterns across its fur pulsed in slow, hypnotic waves of deep blue touched with gold. She approached slowly, as had become their custom, but tonight, the creature didn't retreat to maintain its usual distance. Instead, it remained motionless as she drew near, watching her with those impossibly intelligent eyes. When she was close enough to touch, it made a sound, not the threatening roar from their first encounter, but something softer, almost musical. "You're hurt," she whispered, noticing fresh scratches across its shoulders and a slight tremor in its movements. "Something attacked you." The creature's patterns flashed briefly red before settling back to blue. It had been defending something, she realized, territory, young, or perhaps the grove itself. The sacrifices it made to meet her here each night were greater than she'd understood. Slowly, carefully, she reached into her pack and withdrew a medical scanner. The device hummed quietly as it analyzed the creature's biosignatures, revealing a complex physiology that was simultaneously alien and eerily familiar, carbon-based, oxygen-breathing, with a distributed nervous system that might explain its apparent intelligence. More importantly, it was exhausted. The creature had been traveling great distances to reach this meeting place, likely at considerable personal cost. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This being wasn't just tolerating her presence, it was actively choosing to engage, despite the risk to itself. "Why?" she asked aloud. "Why do you keep coming back? I hurt you. I could have killed you. Why don't you hate me?" The creature studied her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. It rose to its feet and approached, until they were separated by less than a meter. This close, she could see the subtle differences in its bioluminescent patterns, the way certain patches flickered independently, like clusters of neurons firing. It was thinking, she realized, actively processing information and making decisions, with a sophistication that rivaled human cognition. Then, with infinite care, it lowered its massive head until their foreheads nearly touched. The gesture was unmistakably deliberate, requiring the creature to make itself vulnerable in the same way she had been vulnerable during their nightly encounters. Zara held perfectly still as warm breath ghosted across her face. The creature's patterns shifted to something she'd never seen before. Pure white light that seemed to emanate from every fiber, creating a luminous halo around both their forms. It was beautiful, peaceful, and utterly alien. In that moment of connection, she felt a presence touch the edges of her consciousness. Not telepathy exactly, but something deeper, an exchange of understanding that transcended language or species. Barriers. She sensed the creature's pain from their first encounter, but also its curiosity about the strange being who returned night after night seeking... what? Forgiveness? Understanding? Contact? What she found in that alien intelligence wasn't hatred or the desire for revenge. Instead, she discovered recognition, the acknowledgement that mistakes could be made by thinking beings, that fear could drive actions that didn't represent true intent, and that the choice to return again and again despite risk might indicate genuine remorse. The creature pulled back slightly, golden eyes meeting hers with what could only be described as acceptance. Its patterns cycled through every color they'd shared during their encounters, the frightened reds of their first meeting, the cautious blues of their early observations, the warm golds of growing trust, and finally settling on that pure white light of understanding. "You do forgive me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You understand that I was afraid, that I didn't mean to hurt you, and you chose to trust me anyway." The being pressed its forehead to hers once more, then stepped back and began to fade into the forest. But before it disappeared completely, it paused and looked back. Its patterns flashed once, a brief pulse of white light that she somehow understood as both farewell and invitation. Tomorrow night, if she chose to return, she wouldn't be coming to seek forgiveness from a creature she'd wronged. She'd be meeting a friend who had chosen to see past fear and pain to the intentions beneath. In a universe vast enough to hold countless forms of intelligence, perhaps understanding could bridge any gap, even one carved by plasma fire and regret. The question that had haunted her for weeks finally had its answer. Yes, it had forgiven her. More than that, it had taught her that forgiveness wasn't just about absolving past mistakes. It was about choosing to build something better from the ashes of understanding.